So today's lesson is going to continue from where we left off with adding and subtracting fractions that had common denominators already. The title of today's lesson is adding and subtracting unlike fractions, and that unlike just means the denominators are not the same yet. We have only one vocabulary word for this lesson, and it's a review for you. Least common denominator. Now this is a term you've been hearing probably since fourth grade. But it bears repeating. The least common denominator is the least common multiple of the denominators of fractions. And we are going to work at finding the least common denominators of fractions as we work through our three examples today. So we have our first example. The directions are very clear-cut. Evaluate the expression. Here we have a negative 2/3 and a negative 4/8. And so what we're going to do first is rewrite the expression so that the terms are vertical. And that will look like this. And so what we're going to do is take a look at our denominators 3 and 8. And what we have to do, just as the definition of least common denominator states, is we have to find the least common multiple of these two numbers. And the least common multiple of 3 and 8 is 24. So now what we have to do is make equivalent fractions and make sure that we are using the denominator 24. And here's how we do that. Again, you know how to do this, but it's good to review. We're going to multiply the negative 2/3 by the number 1, only we're going to make the number 1 look like a fraction. 3 goes into 24 8 times. So we are going to multiply negative 2/3 by 8/8. A negative 2 times 8 is a negative 16. We're going to do the same thing down here. We're going to multiply negative 4/8 by a 1. And this time the number 1 is going to look like 3/3 because 8 times 3 is 24. 4 times 3, we have a negative 12. So now we have a negative 16 24ths and a negative 12 24ths. We're going to combine them. Since both fractions are negative, we know that our answer will be negative. We know that our denominator is 24. And when we're combining two negative numbers, we just have to add them. That gives us 28. So we are one step closer towards solving our problem. We have negative 28 over 24, and the rule with fractions, as I say all the time, is you have to write it in the simplest form. No matter what the simplest form is, you're always going to be negative if you're starting out as a negative. 28 is greater than 24, so we know that we're going to have a mixed number. 24 goes into 28 once, with 4 left over. 4 24ths, but we're not done yet because 4 and 24, 4 over 24 is not simplified. We'll keep our negative 1 exactly as it is. The greatest common factor of 4 and 24 is 4. 4 goes into 4 once. 4 goes into 24 6 times. So this is our final answer. When we combine a negative 2/3 and a negative 4/8, we have a total of a negative 1 and 1/6. Okay, now we have a word problem for number 2. I'll read it to you. My 3 dogs have the following weights: 23 1/8 pounds, 72 1/2 pounds, 15 2/3 pounds. What is the range of their weights? Now, range is an important word. It's not a word that's new to you, but it's not a word we use often. The range of a set of data means the difference between the greatest and the least. So my heaviest dog is 72 1/2 pounds, and the one that weighs the least is 15 2/3. And as you can see, I've already worked out the math, but I do want to talk through it. Just as in the lesson before this, when we're adding and subtracting like fractions, and we are dealing with mixed numbers, there are 2 different ways that you can go about solving it. Now this first way, let's go one step at a time. I don't want to get ahead of myself. The first thing that I did, because there are a couple of things that we have to look at. We have a half and we have thirds. So the first thing that I did was I found the common denominator, which is 6, and I wrote equivalent fractions. So 1/2 equals 3/6, 2/3 equals 4/6. So now we have 72 and 3/6 minus 15 and 4/6. And as you can see, the 3 is less than the 4, so I had to regroup. Now this first regrouping method this regrouping that I did was I took 1 away from the 72, which left our whole number at 71, and I took that 1 and made it a 6/6, and I added it to the 3/6, and that gives us 9/6. So 71 and 9/6 is the equivalent of 72 and 3/6. And then I just moved my 15 and 4/6 over because I don't need to change that. And now I just subtract. 9/6 minus 4/6 is 5/6. 71 minus 15 is 56. Now I know that this is not the preferred method for most of you, but it is for some, and it's important to know that you can regroup when you have a mixed number. Now the other method which some of you favor, or most of you favor, is taking your mixed numbers and changing them into improper fractions. And I've done that already. 72.5 becomes 145 halves, and 15 and 2/3 becomes 47 thirds. And now we have the issue of needing to find the common denominator, and of course we'll use 6 because that's the least. So when I go from a 2 to a 6, I have to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 3. So 145 over 2 becomes 435 over 6. Likewise, 47 over 3, when we double everything to get to the denominator 6, we end up with 94 over 6. Then we just do our regular subtraction. 435 minus 94 is 341 over the denominator 6. And then when you do your long division, 341 divided by 6, you will get 56 and 5/6. So just as I show you in class, regardless of the method you choose, you will get to the right answer. It's just a matter of your preference. Now, as I had said in the last video and in my lessons in class, sometimes people prefer this because once you move into working with such greater numbers, you might not want to be doing the long division. But again, it's up to you. Either way, you'll get to the same place. And now for our last example. Simplifying the expression. Now, the only difference between these problems and the ones in the first two examples is that we have variables. So here we have an a over 4 and a negative 2a over 3. Now, none of the steps that we need to follow change. We still need to find the least common denominator, and then we have to move our original fractions and convert them into equivalent fractions. Now the least common denominator of 4 and 3 is 12. So right away, first thing I do is I draw my fraction bars and write in my denominator. Now to go from a 4 to a 12, we have to multiply by 3. Now the way that you change the top number is the same way you have to change the bottom number. So we have a times 3, which is 3a. And then 3 into 12, well, that's times 4, which means I have to also multiply the numerator by a 4. And a negative 2a times 4 is a negative 8a. And so now what we have is a positive 3a and a negative 8a. I know that our denominator is going to be 12. And so a positive, when we are combining variable terms, that variable is going to stay the same, and we're just going to focus on the coefficients now. So we have a positive 3 and a negative 8, and together they make a negative 5. So the simplified form of these two expressions is negative 5a over 12. Let's do the same thing, only here we have the variable in the denominator. So again, the x will remain in the denominator, and we look only at the coefficients. So 5 and 6. The least common multiple of 5 and 6 is 30. So our denominator is 30x. And as I said before, the steps that we follow don't change just because of the presence of a variable. So 5x into 30x, so we're looking at the 5 and the 30. To go from 5 to 30, we have to multiply by 6. 3 times 6 is 18, and they're both negative. 6 into 30 is 5 times. So I multiply both by 5. 2 times 5 is 10. Now, since they're both negative numbers, we just have to add the numerators. 18 and 10 make 28. So now we have negative 28 over 30x. And as I've said in class, when you have to look to simplify a fraction that has a variable in it, again, we look to the coefficients. 28 over 30, by virtue of the fact that they're both even numbers, you know that they can be simplified. Our x stays in the denominator. It will still be negative. 28 over 30 becomes 14 over 15x, and that's our final answer, negative 14 over 15x.